Live.
Voilà, c'est bon. All right. Hello, everybody who's joining us live for this second hangout of our course on antibiotic resistance. I am right now here with Professor Didier Mazel and Dr. Béatrice Berceau, who are joining us to answer all your questions. Thank you so much for participating with us, for staying active in the different forums, and we've been enjoying this quite a bit, so let's get to the questions directly. First, I'm going to address a more technical question that relates to the course that was asked by Selma. She is from Algeria, and she participated in all the tests. She was able to get a score above 50%, which means she is entitled to get her certificate. She's just curious about how and when she's going to get it. Actually, the certificates will only be available starting July 8th, which is the last date to submit your final test. So once this date has been passed, you will be able to download your certificates from the courseware section of the MOOC. So this should be easy enough. You just have to be a little bit patient with this. And then next, I'm going to follow this up with the actual meaty questions, the ones that deal with the content of the course. And the first one we'd like to address was asked by Justine56. And the question goes as follows. She's interested in the One Health concept. So she says, as you explain on the course, the One Health concept tries to express that different professionals should be involved in different health subjects. A great example then is that of antibiotic resistance. As you show in week 4 to 3, some studies appear to confirm that human antibiotic consumption is possibly the main source of genes and genetic elements in the environment relating to antibiotic resistance. But I have read papers where it appears that the main source is generated by farmers. Are there any accurate or reliable data to confirm this? Obviously, I understand that human as well as veterinary sources have to be controlled to reduce such issues. And I will then let Professor Didier Mazel answer this first question, if you would like to do so.
Okay, so dear Justine, the truth is in between. In fact, overall, so it's hard to give exact numbers, but I can provide them. But in general, the consumption for animal treatment is at least equal to the consumption for human. But it can go up to two or threefold larger amount for animal. So now, antibiotics in most countries are banned as a growth promoter, but they are still used for treatment. So, of course, they contribute to the general selection for resistance genes and resistance mechanism. But in many cases, I mean, now there are also an additional level of prevention for the rise of resistance, is that the antibiotics that are used in human medicine are almost abandoned or prevented to be used in animals. But of course, the previous habits and the previous usage have for animal growth and treatment have, of course, contributed to the general rise of resistance. But now the tendency is to reduce by in large proportion the use in animals, and you can get access to real numbers either on the EU site dealing for resistance and in the US, but the general tendency is the same. So there is a very strong reduction in animal consumption, but the contribution to the general resistance is hard to really evaluate. But of course, they have this use has an influence on the rise of resistance. That's it.
Great, thank you so much. So we're gonna move on to the next question, which was asked by Samov. Pretty simple but very pertinent question. He wants to know why the use of bacteriophages is not as common in the world. He considers it a great alternative to that of the use of antibiotics. So I believe Didier will also handle this question.
So that's a very interesting question. So there are at least two, I mean, of course, they are a very good solution, at least for certain type of infection. Because one of the things is the access of the infectious site. So bacteriophage can easily access to peripheric or peripheral, infectious, like on the skin or even in the lung. But then if you have a very deep infectious site, it will be, I mean, it's much more difficult to make the proper delivery. Then the second issue is that they can trigger an immunogenic reaction. So there are currently several trials that are trying to evaluate how far we can use the bacteriophage and in general the phage therapy as an alternate solution against, in particular, against antibiotic resistant bugs. But this first need to be really evaluated. Then, of course, once we will have established all these parameters, I'm sure bacteriophage will be used for different kind of treatment of infectious disease.
I can add something?
Of course.
Didier. So bacteriophage can be used, as you say, in osteomyelitis infection, and for example, in legs, when we have something that we cannot perform nothing, and with bacteriophage we can they are able to leave the legs and not to cut it. But it's not in France, it's in some country and usually in the east of Europe. And the second thing I want to say is that one phage is able to be with one bacteria. So if we treat with phage, we have 100 combination with one bacteria. It's difficult, for example, when the patient have a pneumonia with Pseudomonas, for example. In that case, we must have all the combination to treat the patient and to be able to save it. So yeah. It's like complicated.
It's complicated because the virus are extremely specific. So and bacteria are used to be in competition with bacteriophage infection, and then they have evolved many ways to become resistant toward a given phage. So you need to have a cocktail, what we call a phage cocktail, to treat a given infection. But it's promising. So that's it.
Great, thank you very much. The next question comes from Fernand from Burkina Faso. And he is dealing directly with the section that Dr. Asmatazi dealt with in the course. And when she said when the minimum inhibition concentration is below the certain critical concentration, the bacterium will be susceptible to the antibiotic. So how is it possible to determine the critical concentration by using the fusion methods, such as agar medium? Is it not only the inhibition diameter that should be determined? I believe Beatrice is going to answer this question.
Yes, it's a question for me. And hello, Ferdinand from Burkina Faso. So first, I would like to remind that for the patient, it's necessary to determine the MIC, the minimum inhibitory concentration of one strain to given the good antibiotics to treat the patient, and to determine the sensitivity of the bacteria, and to choose the good treatment. And the definition of MIC is the lowest concentration of antibiotics in milligram per liters that inhibit any visible culture after 18 hours of the culture at 27 degrees. So when I can ask now your question. So the MIC could be determined by different way. One is the dilution in the liquid medium of the antibiotics and the bacteria, and the diffusion in the agar medium. And it's your questions. Why can we have a combination with MIC and diameters? And in the antibiograms, in agar medium, the MIC is correlated by a diameter, and we have some rule to give this correlation. And the rules are decided by learned society. And the learned society are the CLSI, Institute of Clinical and Laboratory Standards, and the UCAS for Europe, the European Committee for Antimicrobial Resistance Tests. So these two societies are the major international contributors in susceptibility testing for antimicrobial agents. They are able to give the combination between diameters and MIC. And why we can perform that, we have some curve with a correlation and the MIC of the diameters and the MIC that are made by all this scientific society. And from one antibiotics and one bacteria, we have one curve. So in that case, we can have an approximative calculation of the MIC. And of course, it's some little bit imperfect science, because we have also that the MIC also moves, the critical concentration moves, and we have some readjustment between what we found in vivo and in vitro. So it's because of that, it's not always the same MIC, and it's always reevaluated by the society, the UCAS and CLSI. So, and sometimes they are not, they have not the same idea and the same MIC for the breakpoint. So it's a little complicated, but for the diameter and the MIC, I'm sure that you understand now what's happened in liquid medium and in agar medium. So.
Great. So the next question was sent by EF Avier, and he wants to know, well, he starts stating that another way to identify antibiotic resistance is now using mass spectrometry, methods such as MALDI-TOF. It can detect specific enzymes that confer antibiotic resistance, for example. So why don't we talk about it? It could probably be a good way in the near future in order to detect some kinds of resistance. So once again, I believe Beatrice will deal with this question.
Yes, yes, it's very interesting. And when I saw the question, I imagined that we have lost something in the MOOC, and it's very interesting to answer this question, because MALDI-TOF assay is able to differentiate between MRSA and susceptibility stuff. So it can be differentiated between wild type and resistant strain, for example, for glycopeptide, or to detect carbapenemas, but measuring the activity of hydrolyze. So of course, it's a good way, but this procedure is now available only in research and not in routine in the lab. It spends a lot of time technician and we are not able to perform this technique like this, and we need that the industrial come with a K in hand test with a CVD or FDA marketed test, and this only test can be used for the patient. It can be also made quickly if we want to perform that in routine. So in 2018, now the classical antibiogram remain necessary with the determination of MIC. The biologist can assist the clinician with some tests like the CVD test, for example, to detect an enzyme the first day when the sample arrives, and it can be able to help with some tests, but not with spectrometry of mass. Mass spectrometry. Thank you. And for sure, this is an important place in the future of mass spectrometry. Mass spectrometry and also NGS technology. And now we have just to have two things. We have to have the result in 1 day at least, and we have to push the industrial in order to have the result very quickly and safe results. So thank you for your questions.
So I will just summarize.
Summarize.
So the thing is that Malditoff is extremely, it's a very wonderful technique and very fast. But so far, it is not used in routine for the different reason that Beatrice mentioned. The lack of adhesion or to it needs to be evaluated for quality and so on. And then it's costly, and it requires more people than the classical tests that are made in routine in the hospital bacteriology lab. So that's mostly. But there is a bright future for it. But there are also new technologies like high throughput sequencing that should also, together with mass spectrometry, help to shorten the diagnostic time. That's it.
Great, thank you very much. The next question is asked by Lorenzo, and he's addressing one of the statements in one of the questions for the weekly tests. He wants to know why the following statement is wrong. Resistance genes from antibiotic producers could be easily transferred from producers to pathogens. I believe Didier will handle this question.
Yeah, I guess so. So why is it wrong? So the simple answer is that if it was easy, we would have seen it a lot. So because we know, I mean, most of the antibiotics are either produced by bacteria, by gram-positive bacteria, or by fungi, and we know the mechanism that allow them to resist to their own the molecule that they produce themselves. And there is no evidence for any direct transfer from a known producer to a pathogenic bacteria. What we think is that there are intermediates in the environment that somehow capture the genes from the producer, and then there is some kind of adaptation, or the genes that they can possibly come from another unknown bacteria that produce, I don't know, another glycopeptide or an aminoglycoside. And then ultimately it will end up in the pathogenic strain. But there is no example of a direct transfer from a gene from a known producer to a pathogenic strain. And people tried to really try hard to detect them, but so far there is no such example.
Great, thank you so much. We still have a couple more to go. These are more recent ones. Very good questions, though. The first one asked by RMCMD. He says, "Hi, I'm really enjoying the course and just wanted to say thank you to everyone who's been involved in delivering it." Well, thank you for that. My question: we know that when you have an antibiotic-resistant population and you remove the antibiotic, the resistance genes are also removed over time. Why and how does this happen? Is there an associated cost to having an antibiotic resistance gene? Or maybe, is it something to do with horizontal gene transfer? Thank you so much for your help. So I'll leave that to you guys.
Okay, so I guess it's for me again. Okay, so there are examples that, again, the truth is in between. So there are several there has been several trials, even at the nation scale, like in Denmark, where they completely stopped for a while the use of a given antibiotics to see the effect on the resistance proportion in the bacterial population. And so, yes, they saw a decrease in the resistance gene frequency, but you never go back to the naive situation. So at some point, the proportion of bacteria that keep the resistance phenotype stay steady, and so you don't go back to the naive situation. So that's the first point. So we know it won't happen. However, I mean, of course, if you have 60% of the isolate that become sensitive again to the antibiotics, that's a good move. So, and the explanation for that is that, as you mentioned, so at the beginning, when a bacteria recruit a new resistance genes, in general, there is a cost for that. Biological cost, it's a burden for the metabolism or the replication or whatever, but you have a slight decrease in fitness. But very soon, and as the selection is going for, I mean, it's quite extensive, you get a secondary mutation that allow to go back to the same fitness. And so even if you completely abolish the use of these antibiotics, in general, you keep the gene is stay present in the bacteria. And so we have multiple examples of that. I mean, for instance, with all the streptomycin resistant genes in enterobacteria, I mean, even if we don't use it, I mean, now a huge proportion of the bacteria that you can isolate everywhere carry such genes, and they have no fitness defect for that. So yes, it's better to limit the consumption or to stop the consumption when you can, but we have to be aware that we won't go back to the original situation. That's it.
Great. Directly related to that question, Ampicillin asks us, what I found very interesting was the concept of epistasis. Clones with multiple resistances can have different fitness costs than expected. Sometimes they are less costly, or the bacteria are even fitter than the single resistant clones. Maybe this goes too far for this framework, but it is definitely worth knowing. I would agree. For the ones who want to know, of course.
Yeah, so that's a statement. So, and that's true. So sometimes you have positive epistatic interactions between the genes. That has been observed. You also have, you have different means to reduce the fitness cost when you have multiple resistance genes. So even by the structure of the genetic harbor for the resistance genes. So yeah, it's worth knowing. But I mean, going deep in this kind of observation, I mean, will require much more than a 10-minute set in a MOOC.
Very true. So we finally arrived to the very last question asked by Lancelot, which is also related to a question in our weekly tests. And it goes as follows: alcoholic hand rub is more effective than hand washing with antiseptic soap, which was declared a true statement during our tests. And he is surprised because he was thinking that alcoholic hand rub is at least as effective as antiseptic soap. Not sure if you guys want to comment on that.
Yes.
No,
Vas-y,
you are the
no, it's not
mine. Sorry.
So we have to we answer for the third hangout. No.
We keep that for the
Just,
summer, yeah.
yes,
Okay.
I just remember questions. Yes. Yes, it's for me. I'm not sure that I looked the question before. So yes, I answer that. The alcoholic hands rub, it's more effective than washing your hands. So it's because of that in us in the hospital when we have a patient, we make an alcoholic hand rub between each patient. But only one bacteria can be not cured by this is Clostridium difficile. And in that case, we have to use the hand wash, very strong hand wash with your hand. And after you can use also alcoholic hand rub, but it's not very recommended because we can have some problem in your hand if we just use too much hand washing combined with alcoholic hand. So the recommendation is alcoholic hand only. And when we have Clostridium difficile that it's now in the hospital, and you know that your patient can be colonized by this bacteria, we have to take more combination of washing your hand. So sorry, because I'm not sure that it was me that answered this question, so I take a little of time, but it's my answer. It's my answer. So.
Thank you very much, and we're more than happy to complete that answer online as well. This is as far as the questions we've had for these sections of the MOOC go. I would like to thank everyone participating, asking, staying active in these questions. We still have a few more sessions to go, and I encourage you to stay active with us, to keep asking your questions, and to keep participating. And before we end this session, I would mostly like to thank Professor Didier Mazel and Dr. Beatrice Verseau, who helped us out with all your interesting questions. And I don't know if you have a final statement from you guys.
Just I would add something from the last questions. If you wash your hand with alcoholic hand, you have to make that a long time. So 20 seconds, no, 30 seconds, because if you don't wash not enough, it's not efficient for the patient. You cannot delete all the bacteria, and you can transmit resistant bacteria for your patient. Thank you.
All right. Great. Well, thanks again to you two guys and to everyone who participated, and we hope to catch you very soon.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.